So put a bookmark in there, because that's a big question. So, and it affects the way you read the Old Testament. Because if you read the Hebrew Bible and all you had was an English translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, the book of Malachi ends with this wonderful assertion of hope for the Malachi refers to Elijah coming and my messenger coming, and so you end the Hebrew Bible with Malachi, and all of a sudden you're sort of teed up to expect a Messiah, to expect the ministry of John the Baptist. As a matter of fact, the Gospel of Matthew sort of breaks open, and there's John the Baptist making reference to these passages back in Malachi. But if you end the Hebrew Bible with 2 Chronicles, and that's the last book in your Bible, then you're working with a fairly closed story. The Jews were given Torah, given the law by God, and because they didn't follow the law of God, they went into exile. And then they came back in exile, and the book of 2 Chronicles is basically a neat and tidy return from exile, and we're never, ever, ever going to disobey the law of God again and go back into exile. And so easy peasy, lemon squeezy, the Bible's done, And so that even just the way that you put the books in order, the table of contents matters a great deal when it comes to how you read the Bible. But then, you have the New Testament. So we'll say this is the Old Testament in Hebrew. And this is the New Testament in Greek. And this starts with Matthew and ends up in Revelation. Well, historically, from the end of Malachi to we'll just say the birth of Christ, you've got, give or take, 400 years. And sometimes it's called the 400 silent years, or the 400, years after, whatever. And this 400 years, a lot of stuff happened. I mean, crazy amounts of stuff happened. If you pick up a Hebrew Bible and all you had was the Old Testament, and you asked a question like, "Who's in charge here?" Who are the officials, the people in charge, leading the people of Israel? Who comes to mind?
Moses.
Okay, so you got Moses.
Abraham.
David.
So David. Yeah, not so much Abraham. Abraham, I guess you could talk about him as a leader figure. Who else? As after David dies, who ends up being in charge?
Solomon.
Yeah. So lots more kings,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So David, becomes this figure of a king, right? And Moses in particular, especially if you talk not just about Genesis, but you get into Exodus. The whole second part of Exodus is all about all the, if you're going to read the Bible through in a year, you start out in January and you're really rocking because Genesis is interesting. It's a fascinating stories and everything. You break off into Exodus and you're still going because it's all about people being plagues and being rescued from Egypt, and that's really cool. But man, you get into the second part of the book of Exodus, and it's like
They're in that desert.
oh man, well, and you know, and then you get, they're in the desert, and then, you know, Moses goes up and gets the law, and then it's a million chapters on all the detailed furniture of the tabernacle, you know, and what kinds of cloth need to be woven together to make the, you know, the veil. And you're just like, ugh. And this is just no devotional or entertainment value at all in any of that. And then you get into Exodus, or excuse me, into Leviticus. It's worse, you know, and then it's, you know, like if you have an oozing sore on your skin, what do you do with it? Well, you know, you go to the priest and he examines it, and if it turns white, you know, you got to stay outside the camp for 7 days. I mean, you know, just all the, you know, just law stuff. Are you able to eat a goat that's been boiled in its mother's milk? You know, it just, you know,
details.
Yeah, you know, you're just like, oh man, this is a drag. Well, so, well, all of that is Torah. You know, it's the law, right? And the Torah legislation is all about priestly stuff, right? And you know, so the priests of Israel have been given charge over maintaining the cultic life of the people of God. They worship in the tabernacle, they perform the sacrifices, and they're also responsible for seeing that this legislation is enforced. You know, they're the actual guys that are the gatekeepers. You know, that you know, is this oozing sore something that should have you sent outside of the camp because you're unclean or not? Stuff like that. So you got priests and you've got kings, and then, you know, who comes up next? You know, what happens when either the priests aren't doing their jobs, or the kings aren't doing their jobs, or the people of Israel generally are not obeying Torah? Who comes to confront them?
Duh.
Well,
Prophets?
Prophets. Yeah. And the prophets are the guys you know, they're the regulators of the whole system. The priests don't do their job, the kings don't do their job, people of Israel don't do their jobs. The prophet, God will raise up a prophet to confront them. And so this is where you get, you know, endless piled up passages in Isaiah and Ezekiel, and, you know, woe unto you, O Israel, for you have disregarded justice, or not, you know, tithe, or, you know, just, you know, lots of stuff. So, you know, if you just look at the Hebrew Bible and that's all you have, you sort of say, okay, gosh, you know, who's in charge? There are prophets, there are priests, there are kings, and even the wisdom books, you know, books like Proverbs and Song of Solomon, and you know, all those books tend to be the voice of the royal office. You know, you associate those books, even though Solomon probably didn't write the Proverbs, and certainly didn't write Ecclesiastes. You associate the wisdom tradition in Israel largely with the kingly office. So, you know, prophets, priests, and kings. Okay, then you open up New Testament. Who's in charge there?
Rome.
Yeah, Rome is sort of the overworld. So Israel's under secular, or not secular, but pagan leadership in the Roman Empire. But who's managing the day-to-day affairs of the people of the Israelites in Jesus' day?
Would it be the apostles? I mean, that's...
Well, that would be true of the church. But I'm just talking about the Jewish people, you know, just...
Pharisees.
So you got Pharisees.
Sadducees.
Yeah, Sadducees.
Can't pronounce.
See, okay.
Yeah, they got Sadducees.
Hopefully I'll
And then there are a few other people that you see witness to. The Essenes are a sect of Judaism that John the Baptist may have actually had a bit of history as an Essene, but we get to know the Essenes primarily from a Jewish writer who's trying to make Judaism intelligible to the Romans, a guy by the name of Josephus. And Josephus talks about the Essenes, but we really get to know a lot about the Essenes from the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls are probably, in fact almost certainly, a product of an Essene group of Jews near the Dead Sea. And then you'll sometimes hear about the Zealots.
Where would you place the chief rabbis?
Yeah, the chief priests were almost always Sadduceic. So the temple that was alive in Jesus' day, the temple of Herod the Great, or what's sometimes called the Second Temple, was governed over by the Sadducees. The Pharisees tended to be, if these guys were, you sort of think of these as the elites. Maybe a little bit. It's always dangerous to sort of use modern political and social. These are the insiders, and they are insiders primarily because they've made an awful lot of compromises with the pagans, and that's why the Sadducees and the Romans didn't always have a smoothly functioning relationship, but for the most part, they looked to one another's interests, either out of self-interest or just wanting to avoid the craziness that comes from lots of conflict. The Pharisees thought that the Sadducees were totally, are almost totally corrupt. The Pharisees tended to be a much largely economically poorer, but they were also a bit marginalized. So if you want a good way to think about this, and it's, like I said, it's illustrative, it's a dangerous parallel to try to paint. But think of the Sadducees as sort of the blue blood, mainstream Republicans, the Rockefeller Republicans, the guys that are, pro-business but just don't care at all about social issues. And then think of the Pharisees as the Tea Party. It's not a bad, or think of Hillary Clinton, and the Democratic National Committee, as sort of a mainstream, sort of bigger tent Democratic expression, and this being sort of the Bernie Sanders way. And that helps. It's not perfectly parallel, but it gives you a sense of what these two are related to one another. Now, the Essenes, in relationship to these, were people that were maybe a more extreme version of the Pharisees in that they thought, the Sadducees are completely corrupt. So corrupt, in fact, that the temple itself was an abomination. That the temple at the center of Jerusalem was an invalid temple. And so what these guys did was they went out into the wilderness and formed an Israel in exile. And so you read some of the Dead Sea manuscripts, and you get this impression that it's the teacher of righteousness, the guy that's in charge of leading the Essenes, and he's in charge of the sons of light, as the war scroll says, against the sons of darkness, or excuse me, who are led by the wicked priest. And so the Essenes were the people that they wanted to be faithfully Jewish.